tyre model titillators, and welcome back to the Gamer Muscle YouTube channel, your bizarre home for virtual reality and sim racing content. So it is told in the books where it is written. Now in this video, we're going to be bringing back up the subject of car setups, and in rather what might seem like contradictory fashion, I'm going to explain why most people, and possibly you, and myself on many occasions, should not care about car setup, and why car setup might actually be a pointless distraction and a waste of time. But before we smash into that subject and get your sim racing arousal levels through the roof, it's worth saying that we are driving here at the rather splendid and forgotten to be included in my top 5% of course of mod tracks, Virginia International Raceway. Definitely go out and download this track for AC because it's bloody fantastic, comes with a bunch of layouts and feels really similar to the laser scanned iracing version. The scenery looks fantastic, it's got plenty of grass, which as you know is important, but it's just a really nice circuit. Also the flow of it outside of the actual mod track, just the track itself is a really nice one and has nice slopes that suck you off and cause you to die in frustration. And we are driving the Gleckenhusen SG 003. That's not how you say that car's name, but to be honest, I'm never going to get it right, so just make of it what you will from how we said it. The most defining feature of the car, of course, is that not only do you have wing mirrors, but you get two monitors in the cockpit so that you can multi-table poker whilst doing endurance racing, helping keeping you awake and more likely to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. An absolutely fantastic feature that I'm surprised more race teams haven't implemented into their car designs. But with that distraction and introduction out of the way, why should you not care about setups? Simply put, and you're not going to like this, you're probably not good enough for it to actually make that much of a difference. Now that might seem somewhat contradictory to what I was saying in the previous video where I was saying that default setup should exist, and that still stands. I think people should get a good default setup. It should be in simulators. Their competitive setups should be there available to everyone without needing to fiddle. Maybe an oversteery setup, maybe a neutral, maybe an understeery, but at least solid baselines and a way to access competitive setup should just be there. That's all said and done, and you know, I've not changed my view on that. And a better setup will make a slower driver faster because they're driving a car that's essentially faster because it's got a better setup. Give or take, I know someone's going to nitpick what I just said there. Don't you dare. But fundamentally, unless you can do lap on lap within 2/10 each lap, you're just going to be wasting your time messing around with setups, doing changes that overall don't actually make that much of an improvement on your performance relative to your actual core baseline skills that you have as a driver. And if you, like myself on many tracks with many cars, and most people playing driving simulators, have yet to nail the basic brake points for a given track, the basic race lines for a given track, and the basic driving smooth around the corners for a given track and car, then messing around with setups is just a complete waste of time. And the reason for this is that driving, especially race driving, is fundamentally about consistency rather than one-off lap pace. To illustrate this point, if for example you were in an online race with other people and they generally lap, say, a lap faster than you, which is quite a margin between you and them, but you drive lap on lap within 2/10 every single lap and don't make any mistakes. Even if you started at the back of a 25 car grid, I would guarantee that by the end of the race, assuming you had no incidences, you would end up at worst at least halfway up the grid. Now obviously, if you are driving against high skilled drivers and you yourself are a high skilled driver, you're probably going to have a decent setup in the first place and you'll know how to drive properly. But also, you'll find that the more skilled sim racers are ridiculously consistent and they can do it lap on lap. So in that case, it's a moot point, and setup does make an absolutely horrendous, absurd difference to the end result of the race, even to be competitive at a basic level. But where I'm talking about is what applies to 99.5% of sim racers, that really do, at a basic level, struggle to just keep the car on the track for 9+ laps. And I'm included in this bracket, bar a couple of cars and a couple of circuits that I've really practiced and got really good at. I'm going to find myself making stupid mistakes at least once every 6 or so laps, and that mistake in general is going to cost me more time in the race and more positions in the race than the setup I happen to be using. Now also, as I was saying before, outside of making big mistakes, a huge part of racing, perhaps the biggest part for actual lap time, is nailing the brake points and getting a good feel for using the brake and modulating the brake. And this is something that I've really noticed with people that are new to sim racing. Whoops! There we go. And the rear of the car smashed up. That'll be £50,000. Of course, I just crashed there to illustrate my point. Look at all the places we've lost just from that one incident. I mean, I'm so generous, costing my position to illustrate the point there. Never would actually do that genuinely through lack of skill, of course. But braking, as I say, braking seems to be where most new sim racers really suffer and tend to not realise how much time they're losing. And I've seen it with quite a few people where I've been in a serve with them and they're like, oh, I need to change my setup, do these setup changes, and they're fiddling around with nonsense and they're not even close to hitting the brake points, and then they're not even consistent. And so it's like, it's totally pointless to be messing around with setup until you can basically brake at the limit of the car and essentially threshold brake and maybe have a good sense of trail braking and even have a sense for how to recover the car from certain slides. There's a whole gamut of basic car control skills that people need to master before they start messing around with setups or even caring. And then they need to be able to see that they can do at least, I'd say, 5, ideally 10 laps at a consistent pace with them pushing, but hitting a consistent time within a couple of tenths, and doing that without having to concentrate too hard. And that's the point where you then go, okay, now I can start looking at setups. Now I would say maybe there's a good argument for having a decent competitive setup, a proven setup that, maybe the car's been lowered a bit, it's got the gearing set up nicely and all that stuff. A basic setup, a basic competitive setup, that can't hurt, and I think that's one of the things I think should be in a game, and that's a good idea. But in all honesty, if you've learnt with any setup, you could just treat a setup with a given car to be that is the car in its current state. If you've learnt how to master that, can control it, recover the car, hit the brake points with that given setup, once you've learnt those skills, you should then be able to apply the general philosophy to any setup, and you'll have the skill set to be able to modulate the gas pedal a bit more gently or turn in a different way to not unsettle the vehicle. The point is, you'll know what the vehicle's communicating to you via the force feedback, the visuals and the sound, to then respond to whatever setup you're given, to then practice that setup and then get the most out of that setup. But first of all, as I say, ultimately, there's no shortcut. It's all about getting the time in, lap after lap, learning the fundamentals. There's a ton of good YouTube content out there. I haven't produced any, so don't go to my channel. Empty Box has done a bunch of videos. It's called Driver 439, 427, I don't know. But there's a bunch of people that describe them. Skip Barber, Going Faster. There's a bunch of them. What I'll do, underneath the video, in the video description, I'm going to put a link to all the basic stuff that you need to look at before worrying about bloody setups. Check all them out, and that'll make you depressed, and your EP will have now shriveled into your body. But the truth hurts, and when I say you, this also applies to me. As I say, I'm bloody terrible with new tracks and cars. This is why I could probably never be a decent race driver, because where you really have to respect real-world race drivers is that they get absolutely no track time, and the talented, crazy ones can literally jump on a track and be on it immediately. Whatever the condition, messed up car, ridiculous pressure, boss threatening to evict them from the team, their life in disarray, girlfriends throwing the rings at them because it was the wrong colour, all that stuff, and they still manage to do it. That's where real world race drivers should be respected. Is not that, oh, they're driving a car fast and they've got big testes. It's that they're actually able to jump on a track and be consistent. That's why I like to rub race drivers. So hopefully it rubs off on me. And well, that then leads to why I'm in this video driving with AI at a track I'm not that familiar with and a car that I've never driven here before. And that's because one thing that I've found that I don't think many other YouTube channels or tip advice guides have actually covered is the value of driving with artificial intelligence and how you can use them to improve your consistency when it comes to sim racing and get your basic skills up to a moderate level. Now, there are some things to watch out for when you do use AI, because they don't do things naturally and they're not perfect with how they lap. So you could pick up bad habits from them. But what I will be doing is a separate video on that, because no one's really covered it, and I think it is quite an interesting way to get up to pace. But that's for a separate video, because this one's already gone on far too long, and I'm surprised that some of you are still awake. You've probably been drinking your coffee and banging your head against the table wondering what this guy's talking about. But nonetheless, don't worry about setups if you're a noob or you're new to tracks and cars, and focus on just getting the time in and practicing and getting consistent. That's the message for you from me, and that's the message from myself to myself, which I'll promptly ignore, jump onto public servers and make an idiot of myself, because that's what you actually do in sim racing. Don't follow good advice, just make an idiot of yourself. But there you go. I hope you found that enjoyable. If you did, subscribe. And check out all the links in the video description. I'm going to go and watch some of them again and brush up on some stuff that I might have forgotten about. Likey, dislikey, let me know in the comment section why I'm wrong, why I'm right, if you're happy, if you're depressed. Until the next one, guys, goodbye.